In my opinion, is the System-8 a Surface? As crackers as this might sound, I've been following this thread this week, which I did find a bit bonkers, but it was all about using the System-8 as a surface. So for those who don't understand the term surface, if you're kind of new to this, a surface is where you set the parameters on the keyboard to control features of your door or a VST. And it works really well where you have a MIDI controller. So the MIDI controller, you're not making any sounds on the board itself. You're relying on other things to make those sounds, and therefore any sliders and knobs and anything else that sort of sits on the surface of the keyboard can be used to control other instruments or other functions or functions of your door or stuff like that. And I've kind of really struggled with the whole door concept on a number of instruments. The MX1 is a prime example. I just could not get on with using that as a door. It didn't work for me. I've also tried a couple of dedicated MIDI controllers, and they didn't work for me either. So there's a bit of a theme here. But when we come to doing something like the System-8, I think it's completely bonkers. Why would you want to use the System-8 as a door? And I'll explain why. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. We all know, well hopefully we all know, that the System-8 was bought out to satisfy our desire, as in Joe Public, to relive the legendary synthesizers of the 80s. To that extent, the System-8 has several plugins that are preloaded on the machine. So it has a Jupiter 8 plugin and it has a Juno 106 plugin. And I've done some videos in the past about how close the plugins are to the original, and failed miserably actually when it came to the System-8, because the System-8 calls the patches something completely different to the original patches on the original machines. Not that I've ever owned a Jupiter 8 or ever had a Jupiter 8, so I've had to use emulators for that sort of stuff. But that's what the System-8 is. It also is quite a fabulous synthesizer from a tone perspective. It's not such a great synthesizer from a synth perspective. It's very plasticky, and the keyboard is not brilliant for a keyboard player, but it's all right for a synth. Okay, and it's also all right if you want to play it with something else. And I'm going to do a video about that because somebody raised that question on the channel, because it's only 4 octaves. And is 4 octaves enough? No. In simple terms, 4 octaves is not enough. The System 1 wasn't big enough. This is not big enough. It needs at least 1 more octave, if not 2 more octaves on the keyboard. But that shouldn't theoretically stop you buying a System-8 if you see one at a good price. But using it as a door makes little to no sense, and I'll explain why. I'm going to load up a System-8 patch. So let's find okay, we're going to use this one. This is patch B6 called LD5th Sweeper. Okay, you get the drift. A very sort of synthy sound. Now, the great thing about the System-8 is it has a complete keyboard of knobs and faders. Now, if you're into synths and you're into creating sounds, the more knobs and faders you can have, of course, the better. And this is no different. More knobs and faders, the better. The keyboard itself is split up into an LFO, an oscillator 1, an oscillator 2. There is actually an oscillator 3 on this. There is a mixer, there is something to control the pitch, there is a filter, there is the amplifier, and then we come on to effects. So over here we've got delay, chorus, reverb, and for life of me I can't remember what the other effect is. But effectively that is this sort of top bar. Then over on this side here we've got vocoder inputs, and here we've got an arpeggiation, a very simple up-down style arpeggiation. If I put this into arpeggiation mode and do that. Bring back the Who. But that's kind of the arpeggiation, and then this sort of thin strip that's along here, this is a step sequencer. This bit here, this is obviously the plug-in selector. This is the patch selection system, although you can quickly jump in and out of patches like so. Let me find back where I was. That one there. But you can do that from there, and then you've got a whole bunch of menu options here, and then you've got two modes here. You've got patch mode, which is what I'm in at the moment, and then you can go to performance mode, which effectively allows you to have multiple patches running. So there you go, performance mode. So that's a basic overview of the synthesizer, and this is why it makes no sense for it to be used as a surface. Because if I take this patch here, I can go into my oscillator. So let's go into oscillator 1. You can change on the fly how a tone sounds. Now, that was the System-8 synthesizer. So, as I said, it is a synthesizer. It starts its life as a synthesizer. But when you get into using the Jupiter and Juno 106, these controls here start to be mapped to the controls of the original synthesizer. And I have to be honest, refer to a cheat sheet, because obviously it's not a one-to-one mapping. So if I go and use a Juno, okay, that's a Juno. It's called BRPWM Velo Brass. But in order to actually play around with this, what you need to understand is how the controls map together. So for argument's sake, on the Juno, the VCF functions are actually taken care of by these control knobs around the side, not filters. If I want to use the VCN envelopes, well, they're taken care of by these faders here and some buttons over here, some knobs over here. But the result is you can load up a Juno patch, and I can play around to my heart's content. Okay, I had to stop the video because the sound went doolally. I am sorting the sound. I know sound is always a major issue for me. I don't know what it is, but the camera and the microphone seem to be fighting each other. Anyway, where was I? I was producing that sound. So that is me modifying a Jupiter 8 sound. I've modified the Jupiter 8 sound by playing around with the oscillators and the envelopes. And I've got a new sound. And then if I really want that sound and I want to save it, I press that right key and I save it off to a sound bank, whichever sound bank I want to save it off to. And there are a number of sound banks here. So the way the Jupiter works, I think it's E from E onwards. Hang on a sec, let's come out. E1. Yeah, so there's 64 banks there I could save this sound off to, which is all brilliant, you know. So I can create the sound on this, I can modify something there, or I can start from scratch, because while you can modify a tone, at the end of the day, if you zero out all the settings, okay, so if we take the okay, put those back in. As you can hear, it's generating not a lot. And if you've got a bit more knowledge than I have, then you can actually start with a bass nothing and build up the tone that you're after. Now, you know, on different synthesizers it all kind of works in different ways, but a lot of the theory is the same. And with an old analog synth, the theory is you start with an oscillator, you start with a wave, and you modify that wave to give you the tones that you're after. And if you modify it in certain ways, you get things that sound like strings and brass and pianos, and you get the drift. But that's what this keyboard is designed to do. This keyboard is designed for you to play with it, to play with the sound banks, to introduce sounds, or those bulk stock sounds that you would have heard on lots of records from the late 70s, early 80s, and well into modern music. I mean, the Juno, the Jupiter, the sounds from these particular synthesizers have been used for years. And even the sound of the System-8, the synthesizer that is the System-8, is damn good. You can use that on many things. Last time we went to see Jean-Michel Jarre, he was using one of these things. Okay, in fact, he was using two of these things on his set. He was playing one, and one of his side companions was playing one as well. So, why would you use this as a surface? You have to remap these controls to control something on the screen. And while that's all well and good, it means that you're not playing the System-8. Which means, why did you bother buying one in the first place? Now, I know this synthesizer was quite divisive when it comes out, and it probably still is in terms of what it represents. Yes, it's analog circuitry behavior modeling. is the technology that lives behind this. It's the technology that Roland put into the ARIA equipment and the boutique equipment. It's not what they've carried forward, because this synthesizer, believe it or not, actually represents the top end of this technology. This is kind of where ACB got in terms of how much horsepower Roland were prepared to throw at it in terms to make it work, which is why they stopped at the System-8. They didn't go on to make a System-16 or another synthesizer like this. They moved their efforts into the Jupiter X, XM and Phantom. But as I said, using this as a surface just makes no sense. So I've been following this thread all week, and I've been reading it with a little bit of disbelief in how people are using this keyboard. And you know, well, each to their own. But there are better surface controllers out there if that's what you're after. You know, go and look at the M Audio range, go look at the the names have escaped me now. But there are MIDI controllers out there. I think Roland have a couple actually, not that I've really looked into them. But there are MIDI controllers out there with knobs and faders and buttons that can be mapped into your DAW, and will probably do a better job than trying to remap what you currently have on a System-8. Because really with a DAW, what you're trying to do is you're trying to move faders, you're trying to turn knobs. So you want rotary controls, you want linear controls, you want to switch things on and off, which is why you want buttons. And you want them in a logical sequence, so you want them grouped logically on the keyboard so that you can make them do things. If you go and look at the Phantom, you go and look at the Kronos, you know, the way they group the faders together is actually on purpose. It's so that if you're doing something, if you're looking at 8 tracks on screen, you've got 8 faders that mirror what's going on. You press the extend button, you're looking at tracks 9 to 16. It's done because it's logical. And you know, things like a surface to control a DAW or a surface to control a VST, when you're mapping things through from here, there is a logical sequence. So there you go. That's my reason why this being used as a surface makes no sense whatsoever. And on that note, you know what? Live long and prosper. Bye bye.